Hey kids, welcome to Stylus Rumble! Effects time thing! I haven't done effects in a little while. So I'm going to do that today. And I have a bit of a cold, so if my voice disappears or I just sneeze all over my webcam, sorry, I'll try and edit it out, all the sniffles and stuff. And I got a haircut, so I don't look like I'm trying to house small animals in my hair anymore. And for those of you who have asked, I'm not sick! People have asked me if I'm sick. I'm not. I'm just lazy. This is what my hair looks like. I'll put a picture up. I just have this like Brave style curls and I'm so lazy. I don't have time to take care of that extra animal that lives on my head. So this is my lazy haircut, not a sickness haircut. Okay, so today I'm gonna just play around a little bit with slime and goop and various viscous liquids. So when you're thinking about slime, you can actually compare it a lot to drapery and drapery studies. So if you're the type of person who loves to draw, you probably, swore a little bit over doing folds and stuff, but they have very similar properties. So you have a few different forces that are working on any of your materials. You have gravity, and then you have like any kind of forces, or movement, and why is that doing that? And form. So these are all the types of things that you think about when you're drawing, let's say, a fabric. So you have a pin, and your fabric is going to drape off this in a certain way. So it's going to want to fall because of gravity, but you've got something holding it up, preventing it from falling. So anywhere that's not being completely held up, like these corners, is falling towards the ground. So the lowest point is going to be the farthest between these 2 points, if you're thinking about it. I mean, most of the time you just eyeball that stuff. And then, of course, this will be longer here because it's lower. And then you get these folds from the extra fabric there, things like that. So slime is the same way. So let's say, for some reason, you've stretched your slime between 2 points like this. So maybe you've got your hands, these could be fingertips, and there's slime on them, and when you pull them apart, the slime is going to do the same thing. So it's also going to stretch, like when it's close together, it'll stretch a little bit, and then as it gets farther apart, it's going to start falling with gravity. Like this. Hopefully that makes sense, what I just drew there. So if you've got, let's say, a hand, let's draw a little garbage hand here. So if it's going between 2 points like hands, this is where it starts to get really interesting with these thicker fluids, because let's say we stretch like this with our shapes, but then gravity might begin to pull it down, depending on how much it's holding together. I mean, say it's kind of gooping around like this, but as it's being stretched, parts of it are going to give up, so you might get holes in your goop like this. And the goop is also, because a cloth is a permanent fixture, like solid objects don't drip, but your goo is also going to be thicker down at the bottom. This top part's going to be thinner because the liquid wants to travel down as well. So you start getting drips depending on how thick your liquid is. That's going to determine, like if we get a liquid like this, you might get some holes that are starting to pull down like this instead. Okay, so your stuff wants to flow down as well as the entire sheet coming down. So it's a lot of stuff to think about as you're going. Another thing about goop is it's very dependent on form. So let's say we have a rock, and this is why I highly encourage people to get into form drawing, because here I can give this rock a form that's a little bit more educated than if you just drew a rock like this. It doesn't really give you the landscape of it. But if you can give your object a little bit of form, just like this wire frame, then you can start to give yourself a better idea of where your fluids and stuff are going to be flowing around, or fabric as well. If we were to throw a sheet over this, then we have our tension points. Yeah. And then things are going to drape down like this. So here, because we have a tension point here and here, we're going to get a bit of a straight. But then the fabric here might have an interesting shape between the two. So you can start thinking about how your fabric's going to fall. Maybe it's stretched out from this point here to this point here, and then falling down to the ground. So you can start mapping all your folds of your fabric over this rock and give it a little bit more of a shape. So the same thing's going to happen with your fluid. Let's say we're pouring something down like this. Then it's going to strike the rock at this high point, and then depending on the thickness of the fluid, it's going to start to flow over the form. So here it's starting to hit a downslope faster than over here. So this side here might go a little bit slower. Once this hits this slope, it might start coming down faster in that area. So you're getting bigger spaces. And here it's waiting to get over to this space before it starts flowing over it. So this is all on one frame, but this is how I would approach threading a goop down a rock face if I was animating it. But except I'd just keep moving along to the next frame. Let's just try that. And these are quite big spaces, so this fluid's going fairly quickly. That's another fun thing to think about when you're doing fluids. The viscosity or the thickness of a fluid is going to inform. We're going to need to put our rock on a separate layer too, because we don't hate ourselves that much. We're not going to redraw this rock every time. That would be crazy. So did I finish my sentence when I was speaking about the thickness of a fluid? So with thinner fluid, and I often use alcohol as a good example of a very thin fluid because it's thinner than water. It spreads very thinly. So here where I'm getting a bit of thickness on the top of the rock, if it's a thin fluid, you're not going to get it. You're going to have to go closer to the rock itself. So it might even just look like a wet form going across the surface. You could use a cutter to manage to keep that super tight. That wouldn't be out of my realm of ideas. This one's going way faster than the next few. Good. Talking and working is hard. Then as you get thicker fluids, they start to build up around the surface of your object. You get a thicker layer here. And they don't go into crevices as well. If you poured paint out of, like say oil paint, out of a tube, that comes out as a real solid mass. So if it was to go into a corner, say here's your corner, it might not fill the corner. It might stay as a circle, whereas a really thin fluid would spread out much, much farther away from the wall, and it would definitely get into every single corner and crevice. Alright, so here we've got our little spill. I'll slap it on twos just so it looks like I've done twice as much work. There we go. Blah, blah. So it's a little bit wobbly since I'm slapping this together real quick. But hopefully you can see how I'm trying to send my gloops here towards the direction of whatever it's falling in. It's going to follow the surface of these curves. So even if you get a background that doesn't have these curves, give yourself a layer where you draw a wireframe over it. Because, I mean, this sort of a rock where it's really round and stuff is going to give you a different result than the square rock, right? Boop, boop. And then have your, whatever you're drawing, go over the surface. So if it was going over something like this, it would follow this line here, and then it would drip here because it's going in this space here. The liquid, depending on, some liquids will actually adhere to the surface. Like if you did a honey or something, it might curve along the surface and drip. So that's something that you have to think about if you've got something flowing along this line. And it would start to go like this, because it's not going to keep going like this way. It's not going to go uphill. So once eventually this is going to get a little bit too far, it's not going to have as much momentum, and it'll start coming down instead of continuing to go along pretty fast. And drips too, when you're thinking about how things start to drip, it gradually start to pour down in a sort of droopy shape, but eventually it's going to start looking more like a drip itself as you go down. And depending on, again, the type of material you have, a water drop will not get super, super long like this before it breaks. And then, you maybe got a little residual drip in the middle where it cracks. Boop, boop, boop. So this one's kind of bad. We'll just bloop. It'll start to like drip down. It'll start to get more concave like this. So a water drip, you might only get, you know, this much before it breaks off. But something really thick that wants to stick to itself, you're gonna get really long drips out of it. I do love drawing stuff that has a form to it. So here, if you have a little goopy monster, maybe he's constantly dripping. This is really fun. He leaves a little like slime trail. Let's see, he's like a super happy guy, but he's just constantly dripping. And maybe when he opens his mouth, some of the drips even stretch between the points. Because remember, here's your point, and they're gonna stretch between them. As they stretch, they start to like come in. So you won't get something that stretches super, like an elastic stretches like that, where it gets thinner, but it still stays relatively straight. With fluids, you tend to get more fluid on the outside, like this. If it's stretching along, like a piece of gum will thin out in the middle, and you'll get a lot more stuff on the side. It doesn't stretch super evenly. And if it's super heavy, it'll start to pull down. Your stuff might start going towards the middle and kind of pouring down this way. It wants to go down. So let's do a stretch. Let's say here's our goop. Let's make it this big. And we've got a hand or something pulling away from it. Let's make a little oval. We'll call this a hand. Doesn't need to be real fancy. We all know this is a hand. And what I'm going to do is just a quick tween so that we have something animated. And I'm going to just slow it out. Boop, boop. So now my hand's going to move away, and it'll start a little bit faster and slow out. That's our scene. We get our slime and our hand, and it's being pulled away. So first we think about where the contact points are. So usually it'll be your fingertips and the palm of your hand. But here, we got this part. See, this is where it's starting. And then here, so this is connected. We're just going to draw a little loop in here as well. So we've got 2 points that are touching, that are being pulled out. And as it's being pulled out, I want to keep it in the same relative place on this fakey hand, because it may drip down, so it can go a little bit lower here, but it's not going to climb up the fingers. So you want to maintain that connection. You could even think about if you had a little bit on top of the hand. You could, so you've got a little bit of overlap there. And this is going to go down as gravity starts to have its effect on it, but I don't want to do it too soon. This is really fast what's happening right now. So gravity is not getting too much time yet to play on it, but you definitely don't want to have it higher. You don't want it gaining height. That doesn't make any sense. So now it's starting, let's say this is where it's reaching the point where it's starting to not be able to hold itself together. So what I'll do is just put in a little hole. Say, okay, this is starting to hurt the goop, like it can't keep maintaining the stretch. It's starting to give up a little, and have them increase in size as we go. Well, and maybe add another one. This one should be stretching down a little bit more. So if I'm doing a rough, I'll just kind of sketch along, and I'll think about the way that all the various interactions work with one another. And to me, just going straight ahead like this and feeling out how they want to interact with those various forces, organic than if you do something with a lot of keyframes. So this is really starting to give up at the top, getting a lot of holes. So we're gonna drag it down because your mass stays the same. This stuff has to go somewhere. So we can start snapping some of these connections, right? So here maybe it gives up and you get a full tear. And once something tears, it's over. The thing, it's gone, or it's gonna completely shred. I think I'm losing some size down here. A good rule of thumb is to go and on, say, your hand drawing, you could say here and here, this is where your connections are. Doing that ahead of time is really smart. Highly recommend that in hindsight. So now this guy's starting to lose momentum, but this stuff's already, like, I give up on you. So we're gonna all start to fall. And once something snaps like this, you also have less tension. So this stuff starts to loosen up a little bit. I think this guy's time for you to give up too. Maybe a frame more. Having one thing snap sooner than the other is kind of nice, because then you don't get that twinning. And then this is going to snap. Loop. So now once the tension's gone, this is all just going to start to fall. This will keep holding on there. And maybe as this broke, you get a little bit of tension coming this way. Like, it's been pulling, and now once it's finally snapped, it pulls back in that direction, almost whips. And this thing, because it's got a little bit of thickness here, maybe it's holding on. It's holding on there, and it's going to start thinning out. So, like when I was talking about this sort of thing, where it starts to thin out like this, you're going to get that. These ends can start to thicken up a bit, because instead of this shape, as it's traveling back, it's kind of folding in on itself. So your ends start getting a little bit more roundy. Let's just do the bottom part here. Let's say it has one super thin moment before it snaps again. Don't be afraid to go back and forth like this and work on little pieces at a time. Just kind of work around your piece, because each of these, your peaks and you have your valleys as this goes around. I'll go back and forth and kind of track each piece. So here I'm following the little valley. Here I can take a look at the little hill there. And when you do that, you get a better overall impression. You get less staggery, weird stuff, because here I can see that this is going faster and then it slows here. So this needs to go farther than it has, because it can't lose the momentum going down. It's only going to gain speed as it falls, as gravity gets its clutches in there. So this guy, I'm going to track him. So it's this. He moves back, and then he starts to fall. So the next one we're going to put down here. So I don't usually draw these points, but if you're starting, if you're just getting used to your effects, there's nothing wrong with throwing in a little point if you want to follow that, if you find it easier. Because, I mean, it's rough. You could get rid of it. And then as it goes down, we might just start to break it up, because if your slime hits the ground at full force, so you have 100% of your slime crash, then you have to track it. So if it gets all over their shoes, for example, you're going to have to make sure that all the shoes in the next few scenes have the goop on it. You can't just ditch it. So what we do in television is frequently just break up these pieces once they kind of, you know, it's over. There you go. Maybe this one lasts an extra frame. Yeah. So I just did the bottom part because this is going to be a 1,000,000-hour video. And I'll play it at 12 so I don't have to fix. Blech. Again, it's a little bit wobbly because I did this in 20 minutes. So you're not getting top shelf stuff in 20 minutes. But hopefully you can see some of the things that are good to think about when you're playing around with goop. And I really recommend you think about drapery and liquids and how they react to one another, and kind of like the main forces that are involved in all this stuff. They have so much similarity in that issue, and it's some of the things that baby artists don't think about a lot, is how like a piece of fabric actually forms over a rock, or if it's pinned, how the tension reacts to the folds. And it's those types of thinking that are going to give you the ability to switch from doing ketchup to doing a flag wave the next day, and then doing a waterfall. When you're thinking about fabric, you have really heavy velours, which give you really soft, gentle folds. You're not going to get real big, crisp creases. And if you're doing a linen sheet, that's going to have a lot more crisp folds in it. And the same thing happens with fluids. You're using something really thin, it's going to spread out very far and spread out faster. You're doing something really thick, like magma, like lava, that's going to, you're going to have real thick flows of that, and it's going to fold over itself. You can't fold alcohol, but you can fold lava. So it's a fun thing to think about, comparing fabrics and liquids. And they're so fun to draw. I love drawing slime. I don't get to draw nearly so much slime nowadays because I'm working on a girl show. We need more slime in girl shows, folks. That's all I'm going to say. That's my moral of the story. Girl shows need more slime. So thanks for dropping by. Like, share, subscribe, all those things that people ask you to do. And I will see you in next week's video, which is a mystery.